get to it. Daniel chapter 4, from verse 1 to the front end of verse 10, and then just verse 18. My glasses. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head, they troubled me. Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation, the meaning of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation, its meaning. But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him also is the Spirit of the Holy God. And I told the dream before him, saying, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the Spirit of the Holy God is in you, no secret troubles you. Explain to me the visions of my dream that I've seen, and its interpretation, its meaning. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. Then verse 18. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its meaning, since all the wise men of my kingdom are unable to make known to me its meaning. But you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. And rather than go through the whole dream as a reading, I thought it'd be best just to give the basis of it, and then just his comment at the end. We've been looking at the subject over recent days, Daniel. We've looked at chapters 1, 2, and 3. Today, chapter 4, and on our return for next Sunday, we look at chapter 5, and the following week, God willing, chapter 6. So it's almost a life account of some of the experiences of Daniel. And it's with the thought in mind that where once Joshua spoke to those that were around him, and he said, the day is coming when you must be very brave. You must be very brave. And I thought it'd be good to look at Daniel, because he was very brave. In the midst of many trials and adversity, he was very brave and put himself in positions that perhaps others would hold back from. And so we find with him his faithfulness down through the years. Surprisingly, I can't find where all the different writers get it from, but they're saying by now in this chapter, 32 years has passed since chapter 1. Now I can't find where they get it from, but they all say the same thing. After chapter 1, chapter 3 occurs 20 years after that situation. So his three friends, when they were in that fiery furnace, were no longer teenagers, they were in their mid to late 30s. When we come to Daniel, this is at least 12 years later after that. And Daniel now is into his 40s. He's not a teenager. He's well into his 40s, probably mid-40s, maybe a little later again. And so time is moving on. Since that first time when he was taken from his home by the Babylonian king and his armies, he was brought down to Babylon itself from his home in Jerusalem, and 32 years have now passed. During that time, he and his three friends have been faithful in their witness of truth. They've borne witness faithfully, and none more so than to the king, Nebuchadnezzar. We find on three occasions, in those first three chapters, Nebuchadnezzar his attention is drawn to them. First with Daniel, and then with his three friends. Their character stood out so much above all the others in chapter 1. Many of them were almost cardboard cutouts of each other They were all very good looking. That's one of the things. So quite a few of us would be in this group, me included. They were very clever anyhow. They were well read in their own language and in their own tongues and in their own people's history. And they were brought to Babylon to be negotiators between the Babylonian courts and the Jewish peoples that had become captive. And so they needed to learn the history of Babylon. Their language was changed. They were no longer to speak Hebrew, they were to speak Babylonian. They were no longer to read the literature, but they were to read the literature of the Babylonians. Their language changed, their literature changed, their learning changed, and with that also they changed their names. If you notice, Daniel, his name became Belteshazzar. Their names have great meanings, but they want to change everything. But when all was done, Daniel and his three friends in character stood out above all the others. It impressed him, because he said, I've not found any like this. In chapter 2, we have a different situation. He has a dream, Nebuchadnezzar, and his dream has troubled him. And all his wise men have been brought into the courts. Now, Daniel, by this time, is still in his teens in chapter 2. He's just a young man. It's the second year of the king's reign. And Daniel had been captured in his first year of the king's reign. So he's still in his teens. No one can answer and give a meaning to the dream. And so Daniel is called. And God gives to him the meaning of the dream. We find by the end of his 3 years of learning, Daniel is not only a wise man, he's been given a gift to understand visions and all dreams. That doesn't mean that every dream we have is from God. He would be quite able to tell you, no, that's not a dream from heaven. That's just a dream of your own making. When I say of your own making, we worry about things sometimes, don't we? And we dream about them then. Nebuchadnezzar was astonished at what Daniel was able to talk to him. And he elevated the teenager to a high position in the courts. Chapter 3 comes in the absence of Daniel. We find that his three friends. A great image of gold has been built. And the instruction has gone out that the whole of the Babylonian Empire, when a symphony of music is played, all are to bow down to this golden image. The three friends, they refused to. And because of their refusal, the furnace of execution is heated to a point that it had never been heated to before, and they were to be thrown in, and they were thrown in. And amazingly, Nebuchadnezzar asked the question, how many men did we throw into that furnace? Did we not throw 3? If we did, why is it that I see a 4th man walking in there who looks like the Son of God? And again, an incredible testimony was borne witness to Nebuchadnezzar. 3 occasions where the 4 friends were very brave in chapter 1, where Daniel was very brave in chapter 2, and the 3 friends now, without Daniel, are very brave, willing to go even to death, rather than bow to the golden image. And now this dream. So his witness has been a witness that has been faithful over 30-odd years. He's been impressed, the king. He's been affected by it all, but it has left his heart completely unchanged. There may have been warmings, there may have been changes of speech, but his heart remained the same. He did not know God. And so we have this chapter, the chapter 4 that comes along, and it's a chapter that tells of a second dream. Listen now, the Old Testament is filled with accounts where God speaks to people in dreams. We find especially those that do not know God had dreams concerning him that had an effect on their lives. We find that a man called Abimelech, king of the Philistines, he had a dream that God gave to him. We find that Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had dreams that God had given to him. We find that Pharaoh's butler and baker had dreams whilst they were in prison with Joseph. We find also a Midianite soldier had a dream just before the battle that went against Gideon and his army. And in each of those occasions, God spoke to these people that did not know him. So it's not unusual for God to speak to people that are ignorant of him. With all the resistance that the Islamic world might have in the Middle East to the Christian message, you see, there are no boundaries with God. You will find many a testimony in Iran and around the Islamic world where you can't say dozens, it seems almost spreading right the way across. Dreams are being given to the unconverted, and they're giving their life to Christ at their bedsides. It's not an unusual thing, you know, for God to speak to us in dreams. Let's not think that God can't do that. He can speak to us, even when we try to block him out, or where others try to block him out from us. So here's the dream. The purpose of the dream is reiterated 3 times, 4 times in effect, but 3 times the same words are used. Verses 17, verses 25, and verse 32 tell us the same thing. That you may know that the Most High reigns or rules in the kingdom of man. That's the purpose of the dream. It has a single purpose, that the king understands that it is the Most High God that rules in the affairs, in the kingdoms of men. We read in the book of Proverbs, don't we? That even the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and he turns it as a river would be turned. The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Well, verses 4 to 5, he tells us of what was going on. Verses 4 to 5 says this, Nebuchadnezzar speaking. Remember, he is sending this out as a letter of testimony. It's a letter that's going right across the provinces. And he says, I was at rest in my house, flourishing in my palace. And I saw a dream which made me afraid and troubled me. He had just completed his palace, and wondering if that's why they talk of this 12-year period between chapter 3 and chapter 4. Because the palace was built on a certain date. They know the date the palace was built. And so they kept, like many countries that rule and reign, they kept documents, albeit perhaps pieces of stone, but they kept documents to give dates concerning things. I was at rest in my house, flourishing in my palace, and I had a dream. And the dream made me afraid. It troubled me. It was something, I don't understand what the dream was about, but it's troubling me. Verses 7 to 8 tells us his wise men were unable to help. As you go through the chapter, it seems that his wise men were unwilling to help. If you listen to the language that Daniel uses later on, he talks of those that hated him, of hated the king now, and of his enemies, who sought to take him away from the throne. So there's definitely an inability to help, but there also appears to be an unwillingness to help. And then in verse 8 it says this, but at last Daniel came. What a sigh of relief. Have you ever had that? A shift where things are going wrong, and then somebody comes through the door. At last. Oh, sigh of relief. That moment when somebody's come in just to help you. When Daniel came, people felt safe. People felt safe. There was something about him that allowed him to make people feel safe. Do you know, for the Christian, perhaps above all, the end result should be that the presence of a Christian should make people feel safe. Because that will tell you that Christ is near. I told you the story in that book, of whom the world is not worthy, Her name was Maria, or Mary. She was in the Yugoslav underground army, I suppose, that fought Germany in the war. They were up in the mountains. She was heavily pregnant. Heavily pregnant. Her and her husband were up in the hills trying to support the soldiers and their families. And the cry was this: if Mary is with us, we are safe. Not Mary now, the mother of Jesus. I'm not talking about that. We're talking about an individual lady who is heavy in pregnancy, and yet she carried Christ to such a degree that he brought a calm in the midst of war, in the midst of conflict. But at last, Daniel came. That's a wonderful thought, isn't it? Verses 10 to 17, Nebuchadnezzar tells the dream. Verses 18 to 27, Daniel gives the meaning to the dream. When you go through it, you'll notice that as soon as Nebuchadnezzar gives the dream to Daniel, Daniel understands its meaning straight away. Remember in chapter 2 when he was asked to tell the meaning, and he had to go back home to his friends to go home and pray about it. You see, perhaps the gift had never operated before. He was still he's about 16, 17 years of age in chapter 2. But here, that gift is operating. 30 years later, it's still working. You had gifts from God, and they don't work anymore. Maybe you've been hurt. Maybe you've come across that situation where you've said, well, I've tried this before, and when I tried, once bitten, twice shy is the saying, isn't it? Well, does Paul write to Timothy and says, oh, stir up the gift that is in you. Stir it up. There's a tendency as we get older in our Christian life, we let some of those gifts that God has given to us to go to sleep. We have to stir them up. Daniel, in his 40s now, still operating with this gift. No need to go off. It's there working for him. That's not cockiness, mind, when he's not going off. No, it's the gift just operating. And as he hears the interpreter, as he hears the dream, this is what it says. Verse 19 says this: Daniel was astonished. For a time, and his thoughts, they troubled him. When he heard the dream, the understanding was given to him straight away, and as soon as he heard the dream, you could see it written on his face. It wasn't good news. It wasn't good news. So much so that Nebuchadnezzar notices the change in his countenance. He looks at it, and he turns to Daniel and says, Daniel, don't be afraid now. I just want you to tell me the truth. What's happened? We find here that Daniel was astonished. He was troubled by what he heard. Please don't think that when you're serving Christ, you're there to hand out judgments. Daniel is quite clearly grieved by the news that he hears. He's quite clearly grieved. Whilst he is not afraid to speak of the difficulties that the king is soon to embrace, he is grieved. He loved this man very much, and that's shown in his reaction to the vision of the dream and its interpretation. It astonished him. It troubled him. There's that prophet, isn't it, that went to that captain of the Syrian army, and he told him of the great things that God would do through him. And then the prophet cried, and he asked, why are you crying? Because of what you will do to the people that belong to my God, and the harshness that you shall treat them with. These gifts, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not love, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. I've heard people with gifts of the Spirit, and they've sounded as cold as ice. And I've wondered why. We have to be careful. We need the gifts of the Holy Spirit to work and to operate amongst us, but we need to have them steeped in love. Come on in, fellows. A good little break where I can take my breath. Good to see you. Verse 20 to 22. Daniel turns to the king, and he says, the tree you saw, which grew and reached up to heaven, its beauty was seen by all. Its fruit, its shelter, its refuge, everything that tree is. He turns and says to him, the tree, O king, it's you. It's you. You are that tree. And in you, people see great beauty. You see, Babylon was known as the Golden City. That's one of the 7 wonders of the world was there. Because the land itself was so flat, no mountains, the hanging gardens of Babylon. His wife, a Persian lady, wanted to have something that would take her breath away, and so the hanging gardens of Babylon were created. We find that it's a golden city. Many of its buildings were sheathed in gold. Its gates, big brazen gates. Its fruits. It said that in those days Babylon was confident if it was attacked, it could last a 20-year siege with its own supply of food. Its river that flowed from one end to the other end, the Euphrates, flowed through the middle of it. Its shelter, it offered refuge to all, to beast and to man. That, O king, is you. What if God was to say to you, it's you I'm speaking to. It's you I'm speaking to. Never mind about Tom, Dick and Harry, or Sally. It's you. You remember when David came to Samuel, and Samuel gave him that little story. And then he turned and said, Samuel, if I could get my hands on the man that did that, I would. And he went off. I would. We say silly things when our temper's gone. And he turned and said to David, but David, you're the man. It's you. To King Nebuchadnezzar, in chapter 2, we see this grand image of gold, of silver, of bronze, of iron, and of iron and clay. Huge image, a gigantic image. And he turns and says to the king Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar, you are this king of gold. And in this chapter he says, Nebuchadnezzar, you are this tree. The dream told of the rise and fall of the king, his exaltation and his humiliation. Verse 26 says this, the tree shall be cut down and shall be left as a stump with roots. They'll clamp it with iron and bronze to stop it from splitting. There's a reason for that, because of the promise of God. They put the iron and bronze clamp on it to stop the stump from splitting. When the rain would fall and the heat would come and the wood would expand, it would automatically, over a number of years, just split. So they put a clamp on it. Why? It tells you in verse 26, your kingdom is assured to you. It will not be divided. You shall be restored. When you know that heaven rules. The things that God does for us, how he preserves us and keeps us till we know that heaven rules. Reign in me, sovereign Lord, reign in me. Is he reigning in you? For 30 years he has witnessed faithfully. And now he gives the king a promise. Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom is a sure deal. What's about to break forth is going to test Daniel's faith to the limit. Because such a change is going to come on him. The king that is. And for 7 years, Daniel, by the grace of God, is able to fend off his enemies, the king's enemies, and those that hate him. He stays true to the promise God had given to him. Your rise is by God, your fall is by God, but you'll be restored by God. When you know that heaven rules. A lot of the difficulties, I don't say all of the difficulties, but a lot of the difficulties of our life can be resolved when we understand that heaven rules. That the Most High rules in the kingdom of man. Does he rule in your life? Does he rule in my life? He's not speaking to Tom, Dick, Sally, or Bob. He's speaking to you. It's you he's speaking to. It's me he's speaking to. Does heaven rule? Let's quickly move on. He's given an opportunity to at least prolong his prosperity. Daniel speaks in verse 27. Break off all your sins by doing right, your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. They can have golden and brazen gates, but they're still poor there. Jesus said that it's not fatalistic, see, it's not fatalistic. The poor you shall have always. Don't care what democracy, what theocracy, not theocracy, what democracy, whatever else type of you can have. I don't know anything else, but you know what I mean, dictatorship and all that. You'll always have the poor with you. Even in rich Babylon, they were still poor. And he wasn't showing kindness to them. Perhaps there'll be a lengthening of your prosperity. Do you know God is very patient? He gave Noah's generation, before he flooded the world, 120 years' notice for people to change. Before Joshua stepped over the river Jordan, he'd given Canaan 400 years to change their manner of life, to such an extent that they were no longer to remain in the land. 400 years. He gave even the wicked Jezebel space to repent, but she would not. And here we are told he gives the king Nebuchadnezzar, we find out how long? 12 months. 12 months to amend his ways. And we find out that 12 months passes. Chapter 2 tells us that God has given you a kingdom and power and glory. That's what God said to Nebuchadnezzar. I've given you your kingdom. I've given you your power. I've given you your glory. Look at what he says in verse 30. I'll paraphrase it. Is this not my kingdom? Is this not my power? Is this not my glory? That 12 months had passed and he hadn't learned that heaven rules. And at that hour, sounds almost like the Gospel of Mark, doesn't it? Immediately. That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar, and for 7 years he was driven from men and ate grass like a beast. It's actually a documented illness that's in our records today. This particular instance that we have with Nebuchadnezzar. Let's not think that mental health is just something that is a curse from God. Let's not think that at all. But in this instance, Nebuchadnezzar had to learn that it's heaven that rules. We must be very, very mindful here. The this is something that is between God and Nebuchadnezzar. It is not a generalization. And so we find in verse 33, that very hour, the word was fulfilled. And for 7 years, he lived in the zoo that Babylon had within its walls. It had its own zoo. And there he was driven from men. His hair grew like eagle feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. Became a wild man for 7 years. And then we read this, verse 34. At the end, now during that 7 years, Daniel is confident. The kingdom is assured, and he's defending it. At the end of 7 years, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. I blessed the God of heaven. I blessed the Most High. I praised and honored him who lives forever and ever. All it did, look, was this. Not a look of exasperation. We've all done that, haven't we? In exasperation, oh, give me strength. But understanding at that very moment, just lifting his eyes towards the heavens, his understanding was restored. And God gave him the kingdom. Some of you have been bearing witness to family members for years, for decades. This man, for 40 years, he bore witness to a man that is now in heaven. Nebuchadnezzar the king. He has been faithful in his witness, faithful in his service, faithful in his usage of the gifts that God had given him. And he's won the man that God put in front of him nearly 40 years before. He that wins souls is wise. We must be very brave, very brave. Please take these words as the words of encouragement that there is a God in heaven that rules in the affairs of men. And he speaks to you and to me. May God grant us the freedom to lift our hearts to him today.